Most people spend their lives surrounded by noise, not only the noise of the world, but the quieter noise that never seems to stop inside the mind, the constant commentary, the endless interpreting, the habit of turning every experience into something that must be understood before it can simply be lived. When conversation ends, the mind quickly fills the empty space. When a decision isn't immediately obvious, thinking accelerates, searching for certainty before action can begin. Even during meditation, the moment the mind becomes quiet, many people wonder whether they are doing something wrong. If no thoughts are arriving, if no insights are appearing, it can feel as though nothing meaningful is happening at all. We have been conditioned to believe that intelligence is measured by mental activity. The faster we think, the wiser we assume ourselves to be. The more we analyze, compare, remember, and explain, the more capable we believe we have become. Silence, by comparison, can seem strangely empty, almost lifeless, as though awareness itself has become less intelligent simply because the mind has temporarily stopped producing answers. But what if that assumption has been backwards all along? What if silence is not the absence of intelligence? What if the deepest intelligence has never depended on thought in the first place? What if thought is only one expression of intelligence, while silence is the vast field from which intelligence itself quietly emerges? The mind has spent your entire life learning how to make sense of the world. Every experience is immediately translated into thought. It gives things names. It compares what is happening now with what happened before. It predicts what might happen next. It explains why something happened, whether it was good or bad, and what should be done differently in the future. This process feels so normal that we rarely notice it taking place. The commentary runs continuously beneath experience, quietly constructing the impression that thinking is what allows us to live intelligently. Over time, something subtle begins to happen. The mind no longer serves experience. Experience begins serving the mind. Instead of meeting reality directly, we meet our interpretation of reality. Instead of seeing what is here, we see the stories we have already learned to tell about it. The commentary becomes so familiar that it feels inseparable from awareness itself. This is why genuine silence can feel unexpectedly unsettling. Not because silence contains danger, but because the activity that has quietly defined your sense of self begins to lose its purpose. If the mind is no longer analyzing, what is its role? If it is no longer solving, comparing, or explaining, what remains for it to do? For many people, this moment feels strangely uncomfortable. The immediate assumption is that something must be missing. Perhaps more understanding is needed. Perhaps another teaching, another insight, another practice, another explanation that will finally make everything clear. But often the discomfort has nothing to do with a lack of understanding. It is simply what the nervous system feels as it adjusts to the absence of constant mental management. For perhaps the first time, the body is no longer organizing itself around continuous interpretation. The familiar narrator begins to grow quieter, not because it has been defeated, not because thought has become the enemy, but because something deeper is beginning to reveal itself. At first, it is almost impossible to recognize. It does not arrive as a new belief. It offers no argument. It does not announce itself with dramatic insight. It simply knows, not through conclusion, not through analysis, not through comparison. It sees without needing to explain what it sees. This is the intelligence that silence quietly uncovers. It has always been present beneath the movement of thought. The mind could never produce it. It could only become quiet enough for it to be noticed. As silence becomes less unfamiliar, something begins to change that the mind could never have predicted. Life itself starts to feel different. Not because your circumstances suddenly improve, not because problems disappear or every decision becomes effortless. The outer world may look remarkably similar. What changes is the way experience is received. For most of our lives, Reality is filtered through continuous interpretation. Every event is immediately measured against memory, expectation, preference, and fear. Before we have fully experienced what is happening, the mind has already decided what it means. But as silence deepens, that constant translation begins to soften. Experience becomes immediate. You notice things before you name them. You feel without needing to explain what you are feeling. There is an increasing intimacy with the present moment because awareness is no longer separated from life by an endless stream of commentary. This changes the quality of perception itself. Instead of seeing the world through accumulated conclusions, you begin meeting each moment as though it is being encountered for the first time. Relationships begin to change as well. Much of what creates difficulty between people is not what is actually happening, but the layers of interpretation we place upon it. We project motives, we imagine intentions, we prepare our defense before the other person has even finished speaking. Silence interrupts this habit. Listening becomes deeper because attention is no longer occupied rehearsing its response. You are no longer waiting for your turn to speak. You are simply present. People begin to feel heard in a way that words alone could never create. When the mind believes it must manufacture every answer, creativity often feels like hard work. Ideas are forced. Solutions are chased. Inspiration becomes another problem to solve. But when thought relaxes into silence, something entirely different begins to happen. Insights arrive unexpectedly. Solutions appear without strain. Understanding emerges whole rather than being assembled piece by piece. It feels less like creating something and more like discovering what was already waiting to reveal itself. This is why so many moments of genuine insight arrive while walking quietly, sitting in nature, showering, or waking from sleep. They arise when the mind briefly stops trying to produce them. Action changes too. Without the constant argument between competing thoughts, decisions become surprisingly simple. There is still discernment, there is still intelligence, there is still thinking whenever thinking is needed. But thought is no longer carrying the impossible responsibility of trying to control life itself. It becomes what it was always meant to be, a beautiful tool, not the center of awareness, not the source of wisdom, simply one expression of a far deeper intelligence already moving through experience. Perhaps the most surprising transformation, however, is not what happens inside you. It is what begins to happen around you. Other people start noticing something they cannot quite explain, not because your words become more impressive, not because you develop better techniques or more persuasive ideas, but because something has quietly disappeared. The urgency, the pressure, the subtle need to prove yourself, the unconscious effort to convince others that you are right. Your nervous system begins offering something different. It offers space, it offers steadiness, it offers permission. People often find themselves relaxing in your presence without understanding why. They speak more honestly, they breathe more deeply, they become more themselves, not because you have changed them, but because your own silence no longer reinforces the tension they have been carrying. This is the beginning of what the deepest traditions have always pointed toward. Silence becomes more than the absence of noise. It becomes a form of communication, a form of transmission. Presence itself begins to teach, not through explanation, not through persuasion, but through the quiet coherence of a nervous system that is no longer resisting the movement of life. Nothing is being performed, nothing is being projected, nothing is being forced. Life simply begins expressing itself through a mind that has finally remembered it was never the source of intelligence in the first place. At this point, the mind often misunderstands what comes next. It hears the words silence or stillness and immediately turns them into another goal. It tries to stop thinking. It watches every thought that appears. It measures how quiet the mind has become and wonders whether it is making progress. But this is simply the thinking mind trying to achieve silence through more thinking. Silence cannot be manufactured. It cannot be maintained through discipline. It cannot be held together through effort. The very attempt to force silence creates the inner tension that keeps it out of reach. Real silence appears differently. It arrives the moment nothing inside is resisting what is already here. When there is no argument with this moment, no demand for experience to be different before you can finally relax, no pressure to become more spiritual, more awakened, or more complete. Silence is not something you create. It is what remains when the inner conflict that obscured it begins to dissolve. This is why silence feels so effortless when it appears. Nothing has been added. Something unnecessary has simply fallen away. Thought itself does not disappear. It continues whenever it is useful. You still plan your day. You still solve problems. You still remember names, learn new skills, and make practical decisions. The difference is that thinking no longer feels compulsive. It no longer fills every available space simply because the mind is uncomfortable with openness. Instead, thought begins arising naturally when it is needed, and when it has served its purpose, it quietly settles again. There is no need to keep the machinery running once the work is complete. As this becomes your lived experience, another shift quietly unfolds. Knowing often arrives before explanation. You recognize what needs to be done before you can fully explain why. Words come after the seeing. Action comes after the knowing. The intellect is no longer asked to create reality. It simply gives language to what a deeper intelligence has already perceived. This is not irrational, nor is it mystical in the way the mind often imagines. It is simply what happens when awareness is no longer filtered through constant self-reference. The body begins to trust this process. The shoulders soften. The breath becomes less guarded. The nervous system no longer believes that every moment depends upon relentless mental supervision. There is less urgency, less internal pressure, less effort spent trying to stay one step ahead of life. Instead, the body begins to discover something profoundly reassuring. Life has been moving intelligently all along. The heart has never needed to remember how to beat. The breath has never needed to be instructed how to breathe. Healing has always unfolded without the mind understanding every mechanism involved. Even the deepest insights often arrived before the explanations that followed them. Slowly, confidence shifts. Not confidence in your ability to think your way through every situation, but confidence in the intelligence that has always been quietly carrying life itself. Not your intelligence, not the intelligence of the separate self, but the intelligence of being. The intelligence that moves rivers without planning, that grows forests without strategy, that forms galaxies without effort. The same intelligence that has been breathing you since before your first thought ever appeared. When the nervous system no longer obstructs that movement through fear, resistance, and endless commentary, silence ceases to feel empty. It begins to feel alive, not because something new has arrived, but because the intelligence that was always here is finally free to move through an unobstructed human life. As we come to the end of this reflection, there is nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to practice, nothing you need to achieve. Perhaps silence has never been empty. Perhaps it only appeared empty because the mind has spent a lifetime searching for intelligence in the movement of thought, while overlooking the quiet openness from which thought itself arises. Perhaps what you have always called knowing was only one expression of a much deeper intelligence, one that has never argued, never hurried, never needed to convince itself of anything. Perhaps the deepest wisdom is not something you think. Perhaps it is something you stop interrupting, not by making the mind silent, but by no longer believing that every moment requires another explanation before it can be trusted. You do not become more intelligent by collecting more thoughts. You become available to a greater intelligence when thought no longer stands between awareness and what is already here. And in that simple openness, silence is no longer the absence of something. It becomes a presence, a quiet clarity that asks for nothing, proves nothing, and yet somehow knows exactly how to move. Perhaps that presence has been with you every moment of your life, not hidden, not distant, only overlooked beneath the constant movement of the mind. And perhaps even now it is not waiting for you to become wiser, it is simply waiting for enough silence to finally be heard.